The smirk on Vanessa's face told me everything I needed to know before she even opened her mouth. Still working at that little online bookstore, Claire? How quaint. Her voice dripped with the same condescension she'd perfected since we were children. But this time, something inside me finally snapped. I tightened my grip on the wine glass, feeling the stem bend slightly beneath my fingers. 20 years of enduring her backhanded compliments at every family gathering had trained me to smile politely and change the subject. But not today. Not after the year I'd had. Before we dive in, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious if family holiday dynamics like these feel the same no matter where you're from. Some things are universal, I suppose, like the cousin who always needs to remind you of your place in the family hierarchy. The truth was my little online bookstore had grown into a thriving e-commerce platform specializing in rare and collectible books. I'd started it from my apartment 10 years ago and now employed 15 people. But to my family, especially Vanessa, anything that wasn't a corner office in a glass skyscraper might as well be a lemonade stand. It pays the bills, I replied, taking a slow sip of wine. Around us, my parents' dining room buzzed with the usual Christmas chaos. My Uncle Frank arguing politics with my brother-in-law. My mother hovering over everyone with a serving spoon. My father carving the turkey with surgical precision while talking about his golf game. Vanessa tossed her perfectly highlighted hair, her diamond earrings catching the light from Mom's antique chandelier. I just got an interview at Meridian Publishing, Senior VP of Acquisitions. She raised her voice just enough to make sure everyone at the table heard her. Of course, it's very competitive, but the headhunter seemed impressed with my resume. My Aunt Patricia clapped her hands together. Oh, that's wonderful news. Meridian is huge. The table erupted in congratulations while I stabbed at a piece of turkey on my plate. Meridian Publishing, the same company that had approached me 3 months ago about acquiring my business, and the same company I'd been negotiating with for the past 6 weeks. Senior VP? My mother asked, beaming. That's just wonderful, Vanessa. And you're only 35. 36, I corrected automatically. Vanessa shot me a look that could have frozen the gravy boat. What about you, Claire? My father turned to me, his way of trying to include me in the conversation. How's that book business going? Before I could answer, Vanessa jumped in. It must be so nice to have such a flexible schedule. Do you still work from home most days? The implication was clear. My business wasn't real work in her eyes. Actually, I started. I could never do that, Vanessa continued, speaking over me. I need structure, deadlines, real responsibility. Some people are just built differently, I guess. My father frowned. Now, Vanessa, Claire has built that business from the ground up. That takes real. It's fine, Dad, I said quietly. It wasn't worth it. It never was. The conversation moved on to my sister's kids and their school achievements, then to my brother's recent promotion. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate, and thinking about the meeting I had scheduled for the following Tuesday with Meridian's CEO. I'd been on the fence about selling my company, but now, after dinner, I escaped to the kitchen under the guise of helping with dishes. My mother followed me, carrying a stack of plates. Don't let Vanessa get under your skin, she said softly. You know how she is. I ran water over a serving platter, scrubbing harder than necessary. Yes, I do. That's the problem. Mom patted my shoulder. Your business is doing well, isn't it? You never really talk about it. I hesitated. I never shared details about my work with my family precisely because of situations like tonight. But maybe it was time to change that. It's doing very well, Mom. We hit $7 million in revenue this year. Her eyes widened. $7 million? I nodded, a small part of me enjoying her shock. We've expanded into authentication services for first editions and rare manuscripts. It's become a whole separate division. I dried my hands on a dish towel. And yes, Meridian Publishing is interested in acquiring us. I've been in talks with them since October. Oh, my goodness, my mother whispered. Does Vanessa know? No one knows except my team and now you. I glanced toward the dining room, and I'd like to keep it that way for now. Mom zipped her lips in a childish gesture that made me smile despite my mood. Not a word. But Claire, why don't you ever talk about your success? I sighed, because it's never been about the money or status for me. I love what I do. I love the books, the collectors, the whole world of it. Having to justify that or prove my worth through numbers it ruins it somehow. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a message from my assistant, Max. Meridian's lawyers sent over revised terms. They're offering less than we discussed. Call me when you can. Something cold settled in my stomach. Less than we discussed? After weeks of negotiations where they'd agreed to my asking price? Everything okay? Mom asked. I'm not sure, I replied, my mind racing. Do you have Dad's reading glasses handy? I left mine at home. Looking puzzled, Mom pointed to the small desk in the corner where my father kept his crossword puzzles and reading materials. I slipped on his glasses and reread the message. Then I opened the attached document Max had forwarded and skimmed through it. The numbers had indeed changed. Meridian was now offering 30% less than our agreed-upon price, with additional performance clauses that would make it nearly impossible for me and my team to receive the full earn-out. What had changed? We'd been making steady progress for weeks, with both sides seeming happy with the direction. The answer walked into the kitchen at that moment, wine glass extended. Aunt Carol wants to know if there's more Sauvignon Blanc, Vanessa said. I looked up at her, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Vanessa had connections at Meridian. She must have mentioned me, or my company, to someone during her interview process. Maybe she'd even deliberately downplayed our worth. Claire, the wine. She snapped her fingers in front of my face. I removed my father's reading glasses slowly. In the door of the fridge, I said quietly. As she rummaged through the refrigerator, I watched her designer dress, her perfect hair, her confident movements. Vanessa had always been the golden child in our extended family. Class president, cheerleader, Ivy League graduate. I'd spent my childhood in her shadow, the quiet bookworm who preferred libraries to parties. And now, decades later, nothing had changed. She still saw me as the lesser cousin, the underachiever, the one who needed to be pitted or, worse, dismissed. My phone buzzed again. Max was calling now. I excused myself and stepped into my father's study to take the call. What happened? I asked without preamble. I'm not sure, Max said, his voice tense. Everything was going smoothly. Then suddenly this afternoon they came back with these revised terms. Their chief counsel said something about reassessing the market value of our authentication services. Those were the exact words Vanessa had mocked at dinner. Our little book business. The coincidence was too perfect. Did they say anything else? I asked, my mind already working through possibilities. Just that they hope to wrap this up before year-end for tax purposes. Their CEO still wants to meet Tuesday as planned. Max paused. Claire, these terms are insulting after what we agreed to. Should I tell them we're walking? I thought about Vanessa's smug smile, her dismissive tone. I thought about 20 years of Christmas dinners and family gatherings where my achievements were footnotes to her grand narrative. No, I said finally. Don't say anything yet. I'll see you tomorrow morning at the office. I want to go through our financials again. On the day after Christmas? Claire, it's a holiday. Trust me, this is important. And Max? Call Diane at Westbrook Capital. Tell her I want to discuss the potential for a leveraged acquisition. A what? You want to acquire Meridian. Max sounded stunned. Claire, they're 20 times our size. Not the whole company. Just enough to have a say in their executive hiring decisions. My voice was calm, but my heart was racing. And Max? Pull everything we have on their current financial situation. I want to know exactly what their vulnerabilities are. I ended the call and stood in my father's study, looking at the family photos on the wall. There was Vanessa in her graduation cap and gown, my aunt and uncle beaming beside her. There I was at my college graduation 2 years later, standing awkwardly alone because my parents had been caught in traffic and missed the ceremony. The familiar patterns, the established roles, me as the afterthought, Vanessa as the star. For years, I'd accepted it, even as I quietly built something valuable, while she jumped from prestigious job to prestigious job, never staying anywhere longer than 2 years. I walked back to the dining room where dessert was being served. Vanessa was holding court, talking about Meridian Publishing's market dominance and how excited she was about potentially joining their executive team. "When will you find out about the job?" my uncle asked. "They said they'd decide after the new year," Vanessa replied. But honestly, the interview went so well. The CEO and I really connected. I took my seat and accepted a slice of my mother's apple pie. "Congratulations in advance, then," I said, raising my water glass to her. She smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "Thank you, Claire. Not everyone can handle corporate pressure, but I've always thrived in competitive environments." Another dig, another reminder of her perceived superiority. But this time, instead of letting it slide, I smiled back genuinely. Because for the first time in our long, complicated relationship, I had something Vanessa didn't know about, a plan. 2 days later, I sat in my office above the converted warehouse that housed my company's operations. The space was nothing like the sleek corporate environments Vanessa frequented. Exposed brick walls, vintage library ladders reaching up to ceiling-high bookshelves, the scent of leather and paper hanging in the air. But it was mine, built with my own creativity and determination. Max sat across from me, his expression troubled as he looked at the spreadsheets we'd spent the morning reviewing. "It's doable," he said finally. "Risky as hell, but doable. Westbrook Capital is willing to back us because of our growth trajectory and their current interest in publishing assets. But Claire, this is personal money you'd be putting on the line too." "I'm aware," I said, closing my laptop, "and I'm comfortable with that. This is about your cousin, isn't it?" Max had known me long enough to see through my calm exterior. The one who's interviewing for the position at Meridian. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the quiet street below. Christmas lights still twinkled in shop windows, but my mind was already focused on the new year and the changes it would bring. "It's not just about Vanessa," I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "It's about valuing what we've built here. It's about not letting someone else dictate our worth." Max nodded slowly. "The Meridian meeting is tomorrow. What's our play?" I turned back to face him. "We reject their revised offer and walk away from the acquisition talks. Then we proceed with our own plan." "They won't see it coming," Max said with a small smile. "No," I agreed, thinking of Vanessa's smirk at the Christmas dinner. "They won't." The next morning, dressed in my most confident outfit, a tailored charcoal suit that had cost more than my first month's rent when I started the business, I walked into Meridian Publishing's gleaming headquarters. The contrast with my own quirky office space couldn't have been more stark. Everything here was glass, chrome, and carefully curated modern art. In the large conference room on the 32nd floor, I sat across from Meridian's CEO, Richard Hargrove, and his team of executives and lawyers. Their faces betrayed nothing as I calmly informed them that their revised offer was unacceptable. "Ms. Bennett," Hargrove said, leaning forward with practiced concern, "I understand your disappointment, but our financial team has reassessed the market value of your authentication services. We believe our revised offer is quite generous." I met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Hargrove, when we began these discussions, you valued my company's authentication division at $8 million. Our proprietary database and expert network haven't decreased in value in the past 2 weeks. If anything, our fourth quarter results, which I've shared with your team, show increased profitability. The market conditions, one of the lawyers began, haven't changed either, I finished for him. What has changed is your perception of us as an easy target, a small fish you can bully into submission. I gathered my documents and placed them neatly in my portfolio. I'm afraid that perception is inaccurate. Hargrove's expression hardened. Are you walking away from the table, Ms. Bennett? From this particular negotiation, yes. I stood up, straightening my jacket. But I suspect our companies will have opportunities to interact in the future. As I turned to leave, Hargrove called after me. Is this about the changes to the earn-out terms? Because those could be renegotiated. I paused at the door. This is about respect, Mr. Hargrove. Something your company seems to be short on lately. Walking through the lobby of Meridian Publishing, I passed a wall of framed book covers. Bestsellers they'd published over their 60-year history. Success stories bright and glossy. For a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt about my plan. Was I really going to take on this publishing giant just because my cousin had hurt my feelings at Christmas dinner? But it wasn't just about Vanessa, I reminded myself. It was about standing up for myself after years of quiet acquiescence. It was about claiming my own value in a world that had consistently underestimated me. Outside, the winter air was brisk against my face. I pulled out my phone and dialed Diane at Westbrook Capital. I'm in, I said simply. Let's move forward with the plan. Her voice was coolly professional. I'll have the paperwork ready by this afternoon. Congratulations, Claire. This is a bold move. Bold indeed. By the end of the week, if everything went as planned, I would be a significant minority shareholder in Meridian Publishing's parent company, with enough voting power to influence key executive hiring decisions. Not enough to control the company, but enough to have a say in whether Vanessa would get her dream job. As I slid into the back seat of a taxi, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Vanessa just announced to everyone that she has a second interview at Meridian next Monday. She's practically measuring for curtains in her new office. I smiled as I typed my reply. Tell her I wish her luck. She's going to need it. The next 5 days passed in a blur of meetings, paperwork, and late-night strategy sessions. I barely slept, fueled by a combination of determination, expensive coffee, and the memory of Vanessa's condescending smile. You're really going through with this, Max said, not as a question, but as a statement of disbelief. We were sitting in a sleek conference room at Westbrook Capital, surrounded by financial analysts and lawyers, all working on what they'd started calling Operation Bookworm. I am, I replied, signing another document and sliding it across the table to Diane, who looked both impressed and slightly concerned. This is going to cost you nearly everything you've saved, she reminded me quietly. I nodded. I'm aware. The numbers were sobering. Almost my entire personal savings plus a significant business loan, all to purchase enough shares in Meridian's parent company to have influence over their executive hiring decisions. It's not too late to back out, Max said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I looked at him, this friend who'd been with me since the early days of my business, when we'd packed rare books in my tiny apartment and dreamed of someday having an actual storefront. Do you think I'm making a mistake? He hesitated. I think you're making a point. Whether it's worth the price. He shrugged. Only you can decide that. Was it worth it? The question haunted me through sleepless nights. Was I throwing away financial security just to prove something to a cousin who'd probably never truly see my value anyway? Was I risking my business's future on what amounted to an elaborate revenge fantasy? But every time doubt crept in, I remembered not just Vanessa's words at Christmas dinner, but a lifetime of similar moments. The time she'd introduced me to her college friends as her little cousin who's still figuring things out. When I was 28 and already running my own business. The family reunion where she'd loudly asked if I was still selling used books online as if it were a cute hobby rather than a growing enterprise. The constant stream of backhanded compliments and dismissive comments, year after year. By Friday afternoon, it was done. I owned 12% of Meridian Publishing's parent company, enough to have a voice in major decisions, including senior executive appointments. The timing was perfect. Vanessa's final interview was scheduled for Monday morning. "Congratulations, Ms. Bennett," Diane said as we completed the last of the paperwork. "You're now a significant stakeholder in one of the country's largest publishing conglomerates." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly hollow as I stared at the stock certificates in front of me. Had I just made the biggest mistake of my life? Late Sunday night, I sat alone in my apartment, a glass of wine untouched beside me as I stared at my phone. On the screen was a draft message to Richard Hargrove, Meridian's CEO, requesting an urgent meeting the following morning, conveniently scheduled during Vanessa's interview time. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it, the moment of commitment. Once Hargrove knew I was now a significant investor in his company, there would be no going back. A text from my mother interrupted my thoughts. "Vanessa's been insufferable all weekend. Keeps talking about her corner office at Meridian. Asked if you'd heard about her big career move yet." I closed my eyes, feeling that familiar twist of resentment. Then another text came through. "Dad and I are proud of you, by the way. Never said enough. Whatever you're building with your book business, we see how hard you work." Something inside me shifted. My parents did see me, in their quiet way. Maybe they hadn't always known how to show it, especially amid Vanessa's constant spotlight grabbing, but they recognized my efforts. I looked again at the draft message to Hargrove. Was this really about standing up for myself? Or was it about bringing Vanessa down? And what kind of victory would it be if it came at the cost of everything I'd worked for? I deleted the draft message and instead composed a new email to Meridian's board of directors, introducing myself as their new minority shareholder and requesting a meeting later in the week to discuss my investment and vision for the company. Then I closed my laptop and picked up my wine glass. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Monday morning dawned bright and cold. I dressed carefully in my favorite emerald green blouse and black pants, applied just enough makeup to look polished but not overdone, and headed to my office. "You're strangely calm," Max observed when I walked in. "I expected you to be either gloating or panicking by now." I smiled as I set down my bag. "I've decided on a slight change of plans." His eyebrows shot up. Meaning I'm not going to torpedo Vanessa's interview. Not directly, anyway." Max leaned back in his chair, studying me. "What happened to she's going to regret every condescending comment she ever made?" I sighed, settling into my chair. I realized something last night. If I use my new position just to block Vanessa from getting this job, I become exactly what she's always accused me of being: small, petty, unsuccessful on my own merits. "So you spent your life savings just to not use the leverage it bought you?" I shook my head. "I'm going to use it, just not the way I originally planned." At 11:30, my phone rang. Richard Hargrove's name flashed on the screen. "Ms. Bennett," he said when I answered, his voice noticeably warmer than during our last meeting. "I understand congratulations are in order. You've become quite the investor since we last spoke." "Life is full of surprises, Mr. Hargrove," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Indeed it is. I've just finished interviewing a candidate for our senior VP of Acquisitions position. Interestingly, she shares your last name. A relative of yours, perhaps?" So Vanessa's interview was over. My heart beat a little faster. My cousin. Ah. There was a weighted pause. She's very qualified on paper. Impressive resume, good references, though perhaps not as experienced in rare book authentication as one might hope for this particular role. I closed my eyes briefly. Here it was, the moment I'd engineered, the opportunity to make Vanessa feel what I'd felt for years: dismissed, undervalued. "Mr. Hargrove," I said carefully, I'd like to make something clear. While I am now a stakeholder in your company, I have no intention of using that position to influence your hiring decisions based on personal relationships. No. He sounded genuinely surprised. That's refreshingly ethical, Ms. Bennett. However, I continued, as an investor, I am very interested in ensuring that Meridian makes strategic hires based on actual expertise rather than impressive pedigrees or interview skills. A fair point, he conceded. The senior VP of acquisitions should understand the true value of what they're acquiring, don't you think? Including specialized divisions like, say, rare book authentication services. There was a pause on the line. Are you suggesting we should reconsider our approach to the position? I'm suggesting that whoever fills that role should be evaluated on their genuine understanding of the marketplace, not just their ability to present well in an interview or their connections to your existing executive team. I see. His tone had shifted slightly. And what about our previous negotiations regarding your company? Is that now off the table entirely? I smiled to myself. Not entirely, but any future discussions would need to start from a place of mutual respect and fair valuation. Understood. He cleared his throat. We have a board meeting this Thursday. As a new shareholder, your presence would be welcome. I'll be there, I promised. And Mr. Hargrove? I look forward to building a productive relationship with Meridian, whatever form that takes. After we hung up, I sat quietly at my desk, the weight of the past week's decisions settling around me. I hadn't explicitly asked him not to hire Vanessa, but I'd made it clear that I expected the company to prioritize actual expertise over appearances. Whether that worked against her or not would depend on her own merits, something I'd never been afforded in her eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Vanessa just called. Said her interview went well, but they're considering several candidates. Decision next week. She seems nervous. I smiled. Good. Let her feel uncertain for once. Another text followed. She asked if you'd heard anything about Meridian. I didn't say anything, as promised. I typed back, thanks, Mom. I'll fill you in soon. 3 days later, dressed in a power suit and armed with detailed notes on Meridian's financial performance, I walked into my first board meeting as a shareholder. The other board members, mostly older men in expensive suits, regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Richard Hargrove nodded to me as I took my seat. Ms. Bennett, welcome. Before we begin, I wanted to inform the board that we've made a decision regarding the senior VP of acquisitions position. My heart skipped. This hadn't been on the agenda. After careful consideration of all candidates, Hargrove continued, we've decided to restructure the role. Instead of hiring a single senior VP, we're creating 2 positions, one focused on mainstream publishing acquisitions and another specifically overseeing specialty markets, including rare books and authentication services. Murmurs circulated around the table. This was unexpected. In fact, Hargrove said, looking directly at me, we were hoping Ms. Bennett might consider heading the specialty markets division herself, given her expertise in that area. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. That's a surprising offer, I managed, genuinely caught off guard. Hargrove nodded. It came from reconsidering what we truly need in our acquisitions team. Your point about valuing actual expertise over presentational skills was well taken. I stayed late after the meeting, discussing the details of the proposed position with Hargrove and the head of HR. It wasn't an acquisition of my company as originally planned, but rather a partnership. I would maintain ownership of my business while taking on this new role at Meridian, bringing my expertise to their wider operations. As I finally left the building, my phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. I answered hesitantly. Claire? It's Vanessa. Her voice was tight, controlled. I just got a call from Meridian. They're not offering me the VP position. I stopped walking, steeling myself for her reaction once she inevitably learned about my involvement with the company. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. They said they're restructuring the department, she continued, creating 2 separate roles or something. One of them actually sounds perfect for me, the mainstream publishing one, but they're still identifying candidates. She paused. Did you know about this? The accusation in her voice was clear. Somehow, she suspected I had something to do with it. I heard they were making some changes, I said neutrally. From who? Her tone sharpened. You don't know anyone at Meridian. I took a deep breath. Actually, I do. I'm now a shareholder in their parent company, and I've been offered a position heading their specialty markets division. The silence on the other end was deafening. You what? She finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. It's a recent development, I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. It evolved from acquisition talks they initiated with my company months ago. Your little online bookstore. The familiar condescension crept back into her voice, but now it sounded hollow, almost desperate. My e-commerce platform specializing in rare and collectible books, with proprietary authentication services that generated $7 million in revenue last year. I corrected her gently. The little bookstore you've been dismissing for the past decade. Another long silence. Then, did you do this to spite me? Did you sabotage my chance at that job? It would have been easy to let her believe that, to feed the narrative that I'd orchestrated everything specifically to humiliate her. Part of me wanted to, but the truth was more complicated and somehow more satisfying. Vanessa! I didn't even know you were applying to Meridian until Christmas dinner. By then, I'd already been in talks with them for months. I paused, but I won't pretend I wasn't influenced by your comments that night. They helped me realize I needed to start standing up for the value of what I've built. So you what? Bought your way into a company just to prove a point. I invested in a business I believe in, and they recognized the expertise I bring to the table. I started walking again, my heels clicking confidently on the pavement. The board is meeting again next week to finalize the restructuring. From what I understand, they're still considering candidates for the mainstream publishing position. Your resume is still in the running. You can't be serious, she said, disbelief evident in her voice. I am. If you're qualified, you should be considered. That's fairness, Vanessa. Something you've never really extended to me. She was quiet for a moment. I don't understand. You could have blocked me completely. I could have, I agreed. But that's not the point I wanted to make. Then what was the point of all this? I stopped walking, looking up at the towering Meridian building against the winter sky. That I'm not the afterthought cousin with the cute little hobby business. That I've built something valuable through hard work and expertise. That I deserve the same respect you've always demanded for yourself. So what happens now? She asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Now, we both move forward, maybe even at the same company, though in very different departments. I smiled to myself. And maybe at the next Christmas dinner, we can talk about our work as equals for once. After we hung up, I stood for a long moment on the busy sidewalk, watching people rush past. The weight I'd carried for years, the resentment, the need to prove myself, the hurt from being constantly dismissed, felt lighter somehow. I hadn't destroyed Vanessa's chances, as I'd initially planned. Instead, I'd created a situation where we might both succeed, but where she could never again deny my accomplishments or worth. It wasn't revenge exactly, but something more satisfying, recognition. My phone buzzed with a text from Max. How'd the board meeting go? Did you unleash hell on Meridian? I smiled as I typed my reply. Better than that. I started building something new. 2 months later, I sat in my new office at Meridian Publishing. Walls already lined with rare first editions I'd brought from my own collection. Through the glass doors, I could see my team, a combination of my original employees and Meridian staff, working on a major authentication project for a university library. My assistant knocked and entered with a stack of mail. These just came for you, Miss Bennet. Thanks, Lydia. I sorted through the envelopes until I found what I was looking for. The quarterly financial report for my original company, which continued to operate as a subsidiary of Meridian under Max's capable management. The numbers were better than projected. I smiled, setting the report aside to read completely later. Then I checked my watch and gathered my materials for my next meeting, a cross-departmental planning session with the mainstream publishing division. As I walked into the conference room, Vanessa was already there, arranging her presentation materials. She'd ultimately been hired for the restructured VP position, though at a slightly lower level than she'd originally applied for. Her expertise in mainstream publishing was genuine, even I had to admit. She looked up as I entered. "Claire, right on time." "Always," I replied, taking a seat across from her. There was a moment of awkward silence, the weight of our history hovering between us. Then she surprised me. "I've been meaning to tell you," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "The authentication guide your team developed for our editors has been incredibly helpful. The London office is particularly impressed." It wasn't quite an apology, and certainly not a warm, fuzzy moment between cousins. But coming from Vanessa, this professional acknowledgement of my work's value was something entirely new. "I'm glad to hear that," I said simply. "We've got more specialized guides in development." She nodded, and I could see her struggling with something. Finally, she said, "My boss mentioned you're presenting at the Frankfurt Book Fair next month about authentication protocols." "That's right. I'll be there too. Different panel." She hesitated. "Maybe we could get dinner one night. Compare notes on how things are going." The old Vanessa would never have suggested we were equals worth comparing notes. It was a small olive branch, but a significant one. "I'd like that," I said and meant it. As other team members filed into the conference room, I opened my presentation folder. The cover page bore both the Meridian logo and, beneath it, the name of my original company. Still there, still recognized, still valued. Not a little online bookstore anymore. Not an afterthought. Not something to be dismissed with a condescending smile at Christmas dinner. The meeting began, and as I stood to present, I caught Vanessa watching me with an expression I'd never seen from her before. Respect. Not grudging, not forced, but genuine recognition of what I'd built and who I'd become. And that, I realized, was worth every penny I'd spent and every sleepless night I'd endured. Not the revenge I'd initially sought, but something far more valuable and lasting. My place at the table, earned through my own merit, and finally, acknowledged by the person who'd spent a lifetime looking past me. I smiled as I began my presentation, feeling truly seen for the first time.